Time 7:03 p.m. on Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021. I'd like to call this Environmental Advisory Committee meeting to order. First on the list is procedural notes. This meeting is being held electronically as per section 19I of the town's procedural bylaw number 6228-19 as amended due to the COVID-19 situation. Number 2, approval of the agenda. May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda as circulated by Legislative Services? Margaret, and second by? Need a seconder. Sam. Perfect. Any questions or comments on the agenda?
Recording in progress. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're so excited to have you.
Well, thank you, and thanks for that very.
Hi, Councilor Gardner. Perfect. Okay, any questions or comments on the agenda?
I want to congratulate you on that.
No?
This is my
Okay,
40th.
Thank you, Councilor Gardner. Was we could hear that. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Number 3, declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature of thereof. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest tonight? Seeing none. Number 4, receipt of the minutes. May I have a motion to please receive the minutes of April 28th, 2001. May I have a mover? I need somebody to be a mover. Sandy, second by Margaret. Any questions or comments on the minutes that we had last time? Did you guys have a chance to look at them? No questions or comments? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. 5, no delegations tonight, but we're going to move to 6 for matters of consideration, which is very exciting. 6.1 memorandum for the energy and climate change analysis regarding incorporating a climate lens into town governance and operations. I'm just going to read what we're going to be motioning on. 1, that the memorandum regarding incorporating a climate lens into the town governance and operations be received, and that the Environmental Advisory Committee comments regarding the incorporating a climate lens into town governance and operations be received and referred to staff for consideration and further action as appropriate. So before we begin, we do have a presentation from Natalie. Natalie, you have 10 minutes, so please go ahead.
Okay, so let me share my screen. And hopefully you see a presentation, correct? Okay, so I'll just take that as a yes. So good evening, everyone. The goal for me today is to present you with some ways that the town can incorporate a climate lens into our operations and governance, and to seek the Environmental Advisory Committee's feedback on these options before going to Council in September of this year. Okay. So to start off, just a bit of background information. Climate change is being felt here in Canada and here in Aurora. The country as a whole has warmed about 1.7 degrees since 1948. That's about twice the global rate. And this is manifesting itself in a number of ways, such as melting permafrost, more extreme heat waves, other health-related implications. We're seeing a general trend in precipitation events becoming more rain-oriented than snow, and intensification in precipitation. Our infrastructure systems are not necessarily built to accommodate this intensification of rainfall events, leading to a higher probability of flooding. Based on recent findings from the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, by 2080, they project that these trends will continue and that the area will experience hotter, wetter weather and more intense duration and frequency of storms. So what is a climate lens? A climate lens is the consideration of greenhouse gas emission mitigation and climate change adaptation in decision making. A climate lens can be applied to a project, a program, or initiative level. What is guiding the town's climate change initiatives? To start, the current council is is highly motivated to take action on climate change and have shown this through several motions over the years. The Climate Lens motion, the Climate Emergency Declaration motion, the FCN Partners for Climate Protection Council resolution, and the Blue Dot Campaign motion. Further, two key Ontario legislative drivers require municipalities to incorporate climate change into municipal operations and decision-making, OREG 588 and OREG 507. The first, OREG 588, which requires municipalities to consider climate change into asset management planning, both for mitigation and adaptation. Currently, the town is in the process of incorporating climate change into asset management through the Climate Change Adaptation Plan, which is being developed. It will assess the town's risk and vulnerability to climate change and identify actions to improve resiliency. Once that project is complete, the capital planning and operations from those assets will be guided by that plan. The second is OREG 507, which requires municipalities to prepare a 5-year energy plan, set reduction targets, and reduction strategies and provide an annual report. Under the Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan, the town has identified activities that have the most impact on greenhouse gas emissions and have developed a 5-year strategic plan to reduce those emissions. That means that the capital planning and operations of our most impactful assets, which include town facilities, water infrastructure, and fleet, are considering impacts of climate change and bound by this council-endorsed plan. The town also has other plans throughout operations, planning, and engineering that addresses climate change at different stages of development. We have the Corporate Environmental Action Plan, our Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan, which I mentioned earlier, the Climate Change Adaptation Plan, which is under development. That's the other one I already mentioned. The Green Fleet Action Plan, the LEED Gold for new builds, corporate builds commitment, the Comprehensive Stormwater Management Plan. We have the Stream Management Master Plan and Tannery Creek Flood Relief Study. We have our Community Energy Plan, which committed an 80% greenhouse gas reduction by 2050. We have our Active Transportation Master Plan, our Green Development Standard, our Official Plan Review, which will be considering climate change under this update, our urban forest and associated forestry policies. And from a governance standpoint, we have our reestablishment of the Environmental Advisory Committee here today, our Corporate Environmental Leadership Team, which is multi-divisional, and our Corporate Energy Leadership Team. So to start off, the first proposal is in incorporating a climate lens into our operations and governance, is to include a climate change and environmental considerations table into all of our staff reports going to council and into our budget business case for each capital project. This will support municipal decision-making. The town's climate change adaptation plan and energy conservation plan, which I spoke about earlier, will have covered capital planning and operations of the town's most impactful activities on climate change. But what about other projects and other activities within the town that don't fall within those plans? After internal stakeholder consultation, the inclusion of a climate change and environmental considerations section in staff report and for budget purposes was found to be the most appropriate. The table will raise awareness of the town's climate initiatives for all staff, help foster dialogue and awareness of climate change issues, prioritize projects or initiatives that support environmental plans, and to incorporate climate considerations within the decision-making process. The following table will be included in all staff reports starting in October 2021, and a similar table will be added in the budget the budget sheet business case for capital projects in the next budget cycle, which is 2023. Staff will state if and how the project or initiative is in support of one of the town's environmental plans listed here. The intent of the table is to highlight the projects that support any of the environmental plans, not just our main climate change ones, but all of them. Highlighting projects that are in line with environmental initiatives supports municipal decision-making. The second proposal is to include town's climate change objectives into procurement documents. This sets the tone and may guide bidders and vendors towards climate change considerations and innovation within their proposals without adding any technical requirements. I've provided a sample wording that could be used. Aurora has a community culture of environmental and economic leadership with a focus on providing a sustainable future for families and businesses. The town is prioritizing reducing greenhouse gas emissions and increasing climate resiliency, both within its operations and at the community level as part of its commitment under the 2019 Climate Emergency Declaration. The town is a member of the Partners for Climate Protections program and has a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% from 2018 by 2050. The town's operation and governance are guided by council-endorsed climate change and environmental plans. Finally, the last proposal is for procurement to consider the application of total cost of ownership within the procurement process, which will support and favor energy efficiency, innovation, and reduce overall costs and greenhouse gas emissions. What is total cost of ownership? It considers the cost of the product or service upfront, the operational costs, and the disposal costs. Operational costs often are the most costly portion of a product's total cost over its lifetime, but usually is not assessed. And operational energy costs are increasing. The federal fuel charges started to be applied in Ontario in April of 2019. Under the federal plan, the carbon tax increases by each year to deter consumers from fossil fuels, favoring energy efficiency and cleaner energy sources. The carbon tax is expected to have a profound effect on consumers. In Ontario, the fuel charge from the carbon tax on gasoline and natural gas is expected to grow by 550% by 2030. Governments are increasingly utilizing a value for money approach in procurement, utilizing performance standards, total cost of ownership, or life cycle costing. Currently, the federal government requires all new buildings, projects with significant operational costs, and all fleet vehicles to follow a life cycle cost analysis within their procurement. I've been working with facilities staff on including aspects of total cost of ownership into their projects with some success, such as including energy efficiency standards, assessing operating and disposal costs within their procurement on a project per project basis. But working project by project is not a sustainable long-term solution and should be a standardized practice with the town. Through the procurement bylaw modernization process, the procurement lawyer should advise the town on how to best implement total cost of ownership for all projects throughout the town, not on a project by project basis, and for all impactful projects in addition to the green procurement policy that is being developed. So that's it. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation, Natalie. That was fantastic. I love the overview. Before we start discussion, can I get a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion? Margaret and Barry. Questions or comments to the presentation? And if we could stop screen sharing, I could see the entire screen.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. If I just may, I understand Crystal has some connection issues. So Crystal, if you do want to have a comment, in your reactions button, you can just choose raise hand and I'll see that you've raised your hand and then I'll call on you to make your comments. Margaret?
Hi, thank you. So I think this is a really good start for the town, and I'm excited that Climate Lens is being put into projects. I'm a little confused about the staff reporting. Is there going to be a minimum amount that projects need to meet to align with our climate action plans in order to move forward? Or is this simply just kind of a guiding table that people will fill out only if their project meets our climate action plans?
Ms. Keel?
Yes, great question. So it would apply, this table would be included in any staff report if the report is not applicable to any of those projects. You know, it wouldn't be applicable and they wouldn't fill it out or just say not applicable. If their project is in support of any of those plans, then they would identify it, and that council leadership within the town through our reporting process with these reports, and also through the budget process, it's identified as a project that supports one of our plans, and it's therefore highlighted, right, and should stand out from other projects, therefore prioritized. So there's not a minimum standard that a project should meet. As I mentioned, our most impactful activities have already been identified within our two main corporate climate plans, the energy plan and also our adaptation plan, which is being developed. Those specifically would be projects. So any projects that come out of those plans would, have to follow the plan, and also then they'd have to identify themselves when they're requesting funding. And we hope through the decision-making process that they get prioritized because they fulfill those plans requirements.
Mm-hmm. Can I have a follow-up question to that? Yeah. So is there any way to then track and verify that even if they said the project is supporting it and they've kind of outlined it initially, are you going to be following up to ensure that they are staying true to what they said and it will line up with what they
do? Great question. So if there are activities that support those plans, so if we have our climate action plan, the climate change adaptation plan, we will have to report when that plan gets finalized. We will have to provide reports. Is it annual, depending, how we decide throughout this process? Let's call it annual. We'd have to report on the progress of those projects, right? So I don't think there is a reporting requirement for each individual, project level, unless it's a special case that needs, a report. But each plan has its own reporting schedule that needs to be updated on its success and which projects have been implemented, where do we sit on our targets, that kind of thing. So it's not a requirement from a project level, but it's usually a requirement from a plan level to make these updates and report on their success, right?
Thank you.
Any other questions, Margaret?
Comments? Not for the first edition. So we can move to the floor for other comments.
Barry? Barry, you're on mute. Barry, you're on mute.
Yes, I'm looking at one of the pages of the presentation regarding precipitation events. Precipitation will fall at a faster rate. I think, well, it will accumulate at a faster rate. It's still going to fall at the same speed. We've got a weekend forecast coming up into the following week also with a lot of rain called for. Is our environmental infrastructure department ready to document problem areas through the town? In other words, if you have an event, a large rain event on a weekend, that's overtime. You know, the regular employees are probably Monday to Friday. So does our weekend crew, are they ready to document the problem areas, you know, visually? Because this could be an opportunity. It will recur every large event, but are they geared up to document the problem areas to anticipate future problems at a larger scale as the rain, precipitation and whatnot increases? That's my question.
Ms. Keel, I don't know if you want to answer that, but just Barry, I don't know how, just speaking to the report and how we would report to council with the climate lens, a little bit different. But Ms. Keel, maybe you want to just at least answer a little bit about the stormwater management, just for some peace of mind. I'll allow the answer, but if we could speak to the report and how it would affect the reporting to council with infrastructure projects moving forward and how you think that we should report, that would be great. Ms. Keel?
Yep. Great question. Actually, so I mentioned our climate change adaptation plan. Through that project that it's in development, we're working with the consultants right now. And I actually did meet with all of our operations teams last week to actually have this discussion. So it's very timely. And part of the adaptation plan is to do a risk and vulnerability study of our assets for climate change. So that will be part of the project, is to identify parts of our assets, be it stormwater systems or water infrastructure or roads that are vulnerable to these types of events that are likely to occur more frequently and with more intensity. Identify those assets and then build a stronger operation and capital planning for those types of infrastructure to increase their resiliency. So one of the recommendations might be to increase monitoring of these areas, you know, post storms and things like that. So that is all part of the scope of the work for that project. And then we expect a list of, you know, assets that we need to be diving deeper to see, you know, if they are vulnerable, what we can do to reduce the risk. And that could be a capital cost or an operational activity. So it is part of the scope, and we're hoping to have all those answers by the end of the project.
And I'll just kind of add, we are preparing for the 200-year storm. And I know that we have identified some major flooding areas within the town of Aurora and have allocated a budget towards mitigating the flooding risks in those particular areas. But obviously we can't capture them all at once, but I do know that is something that we do have our eyes and ears on. Any other questions or comments about the report? Colin?
Yes, thank you. It's a great report. I'm wondering, is there going to be a person at the town, maybe it would be yourself or someone else, who's responsible as the go-to person to apply the environmental lens, or as a resource person? It seems like a lot of it's something tacked on to an already busy job. And I'm just wondering if you're going to have the town resources to handle it.
Ms. Gill?
Good question. So we did discuss how we would apply it. So you're right. I can't be the one who does it for every project or every report that goes to council. So there will be a training period where we would train staff who are either budget makers or report writers on how to use the climate change consideration table and how to apply it to these processes. I will always be available to help and support staff. But one of the goals of this is not just for council and for other decision makers within the town to identify projects that support these plans, but it's also to educate the staff, of these plans, because sometimes we work like within our departments and we don't know what our neighboring department is working on. And through this education and training that we'll be doing and putting these plans, front and center in the discussion, will educate everyone on what's being done at the town, and get that mindset going, changing staff's mindset and getting them focused on these plans.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about the procurement process? Any questions about the total cost of ownership or the table with all the plans and how we would be reporting, or that assessment or matrix, or as we call it, the climate lens? Any other feedback? Sam?
I'm just wondering about where public participation is embedded in this for people to have their say about where they think the areas of flooding are, or where they think the climate stressors are going to be, or their input on any of these plans. I'm wondering if they're just embedded within the plans, or if there needs to be a separate category for which to report on about whether or not there is public or voluntary participation in any of the going to be reported on plans.
Ms. Gill?
That's a really great point. You're right in that each individual plan has usually a public engagement or at least a stakeholder consultation that includes external people. Depends on the scope of the project. Like we had our community energy plan, so it like had a huge impact on community. It was the plan for the community. So we had a very large engagement piece to the project. I was almost centered to the plan. So we had a lot of opportunity for public input throughout. So when, for example, a project that was recommended, from that plan comes forth, and we have a staff report that goes to council, there's probably case by case, but usually we don't need now an engagement piece, because it had been done at the plan level, and now we're like ready to go with the projects and start getting them implemented, right? So it really depends on the topic, but normally at the plan level, each of our plans, even our stormwater management plan, master plan, had like a public consultation piece. But also when we're talking about our reports, the environmental advisory committee is like representative of the community, right? So that's another piece where we're getting the public's input into individual projects or reports that go to council. In this case, we have the environmental advisory committee, but we have other ones like the community, depending on the topic, right? We have different committees, and that's where we strive to get, the opinion of the community. So that's one of the tools that we use. But I did want to mention for our next 5-year corporate environmental action plan, which is the 5-year plan that we work on at a corporate level for all the town, like to develop different plans or other activities that need to be done. The new plan that's going to be developed will have a big piece with public engagement, because we want to hear what the public has to say in terms of what they want us to be working on. So there'll be a big engagement piece on that one, and we've already set that there's going to be a bit of a budget, because it costs money to get public involved using different tools and mechanisms and things. So we are planning to have the new 5-year plan like heavily engaged with the public. So yeah, so we are working towards that, and there is a lot of value in that, and we're always striving to get more and more. So it's a very important point.
Sam, any follow-up?
Not really. I think it's a great step to look at things with a climate lens. I worry that it will be not so much put on the back burner, but it will be a lot of nice words, I think, if people don't fully understand what it is that, like, what looking through a climate lens is, or what the total cost things are, what a life cycle analysis is. So I think as long as the educational portion within the people who are going to be reporting is there, I think it could be a really powerful step.
Thanks, Sam. I really appreciate that. I agree with what you're saying, and the educational piece is so important. And I think this is why we're here today and speaking to you and trying to get everybody to understand and educate this whole process. And I love the fact that we're having this conversation. So that's great. Barry, you had some comments?
Yeah, Sam's comment about public involvement, the education of our public. It sounds a little corny what I'm about to say, but it does give perhaps residents a chance to become involved. If we had a periodic photo contest and we call it the Climate Lens Photo Contest, I'm sorry it sounds corny, but it would allow the public to document what they think is important, relevant. I couldn't avoid that comment because of the climate lens being a visual play on words. We could play it 2 ways. Thank you.
I think it's a great idea, Barry. Margaret?
Yeah, so for the procurement policy or documents, I guess, I'm just wondering, like in page 9 of the report, there is mention of a green procurement policy that is under development. Is that the kind of policy we're talking about with regards to the second initiative of putting this climate lens into procurement documents?
Ms. Keel?
Great question. So the second proposal that I put was that general wording. That we want, anyone who picks up or wants to work with us, they'll have to read that and know that, this is important to us. So my proposal is to put it in all documents that are related to procurement. So it wouldn't be related to green procurement or anything like that. It was, we discussed that, usually we have a section that talks about Aurora, population and what we have in our community, and then having that kind of statement within our kind of description of our town. So that would apply to all procurement. The third proposal, when we talk about the total cost of ownership, the proposal that I'm putting out is that that's applied to all projects, not just green procurement. So green procurement often, is directed at certain kind of natural products or, chemical free or different, water efficiency products and things like that, so that they would be kind of like a specialty procurement when you go through the green procurement process. What I'm proposing is, and then traditionally you would have kind of energy efficiency projects and these kind of specialty projects as well. What I'm proposing that our procurement lawyer, who's the town is consulting with on modernizing our procurement process, is to include it in all of our projects that any project that goes forward, if it has you know, an upfront cost, an operational cost, and a disposal cost, they should be assessed each time and not in a special case project by project basis, but they should always be assessed. Now it's, you know, the proposal is for the lawyer to provide feedback to us on how to best, you know, if it makes sense for us in our procurement bylaw, and also how to do that and how to best do that. So that's kind of the difference between the two.
Mm-hmm. I just like with the second proposal with the sample wording, like I'm just wondering why we wouldn't put more kind of technical or minimum requirements in if we do want to reach this 80%. Like, is there no then threshold or like go, no go decision to a vendor if they're not going to meet those requirements and they potentially might increase our greenhouse gas emissions? Like as a consider, yeah.
It's a great question. I wish we had our procurement team here to answer some of the questions. My understanding is we can't be putting technical requirement, like if we, that would then be very project specific, right? So, you know, a procurement, you know, for a new boiler would have technical requirements that you would want to meet, and then you can put them in your, you know, terms of reference. But, you know, a different project wouldn't have the same technical requirements as a boiler, right? Like, let's call it windows or something. So it would, you wouldn't be able to put any specifications at that point. So something, you know, that is quite straightforward is just saying, you know, we have these goals, you know, and without needing to project by project have these technical specifications, what we're just doing is we're just like setting the scene of our town, right? And the scene is that we have these commitments, and you know, these points and these objectives are really important to us, and you should, you know, consider that when you're putting your proposal together to work with us, right? So it's more of you know, it's the bidders and vendors can choose, you know, how they want to bid. They can consider what we're telling them, what we're interested in, or they cannot consider it. But they're at, you know, the risk that a competitor will consider it and come up with, you know, a better proposal that, you know, reflects that. But from a procurement standpoint, they, regardless, each project has to fit its own, you know, terms of reference that are specified for each project, right? So we're not at that level, and that's kind of what we're asking in the last proposal. And the third option was, you know, that procurement process, like, is there a way for us to standardize it with, you know, with wording or technical requirements that would be across the board, or is it really just a project basis where, you know, someone needs to be involved or get a third-party consultant to help us write these documents and set these specifications on our behalf. So that's why the first one is more of a, let's hope for the best, you know, like these are our objectives, you know, we hope that you consider them in your proposal, right? But you don't have to. Yeah.
Margaret, do you have a follow-up?
No, I think it's a good start. I think there's a lot more that we can do, but it will take time, right? And we don't want to, like, you know, scare everyone off from doing business with us. I guess for the total cost of ownership, does the town currently, or has the town considered putting an internal price on carbon for projects? And if it's beyond the cost or like the amount of carbon, if it's really carbon intensive, will they not go through with that project? Or is that something that you would put onto vendors?
Ms. Keel?
No, we haven't got to the point of putting a price on carbon. I did look into it with some other municipalities. It is a work in progress. with other municipalities as well, and they're trying to. I think it's still early phase in how that can be done. And again, you know, in a way, assessing total cost of ownership is in a way almost putting a carbon price, because they're so related. The energy cost, when you consider the whole lifespan, right, is reflected in the cost. So that's why we're looking to the procurement modernization process with the procurement lawyer to guide us and you know, support us on what makes the most sense for the town today, because we are in that place right now where they are updating our procurement bylaw. So yeah, so it is something that's evolving right now with municipalities, and that we're like watching, you know, for development.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Thanks, Ms. Keel. Barry, you had some comments?
Yeah, the proposal number 2, the word innovation. It strikes me after this discussion you just had that the price for innovation, that's going to be a hard thing for contractors or firms to get their arms around, their heads around. It's a case where should our staff not be prime knowledge holders for innovation? I mean, if we just say on a procurement document, oh, we have a problem, please submit your solutions. Well, traditionally it's been the price, the money price, that's guided the town in deciding which option to go for. Now we're saying the climate cost is as important, if not more important, than the monetary price. So I don't know, it just seems that we're going to leave those companies kind of flapping in the wind, wondering what the heck do we want? Do we want a viable climate proof solution, or do we want an affordable solution? We can't ask for an affordable solution that's going to be a climate solution. We have to be more specific. Innovation, hoping that a firm, a company, a contractor will come up with an innovative solution that's got great climate benefits, but hey, it's double the price what any other conventional solution would be. So why even bother submitting it if it's too expensive for the town? We have to show that we're either committed to climate solutions that may be more expensive. Otherwise, these people aren't going to do their homework, aren't going to put together, you know, a bid if they don't stand a chance of being received for and you know, being paid for their innovation. Innovation is great, but if it's not going to be received in reality, I mean, what's the guiding light here? Bottom line dollar or climate costs? I think we have to commit ourselves as a municipality. We can't just say, oh, we'd like to see some innovation. That's not enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. And if you don't mind, I'll chime in a little bit. Ms. Keel, I think you would agree. It is a delicate balance of trying to figure out the cost recovery and obviously the expense. Using more innovative materials may be more costly, but at the same time, you know, you try and factor in the life cycle and your carbon capture as well. And I think that's the delicate balance that we're trying to achieve here. You know, I think what we're trying to do now is be actionable and being more conscious about the kinds of things that we do procure and giving these opportunities and showing these other businesses that we are looking to be a bit more conscious about the environment and the choices that we make. Do I think it'll be a little bit more costly upfront? In some circumstances it may be, and maybe that's the choice that consciously as a town and a municipality we want to make in certain circumstances, depending on what it is. And I think that's the delicate balance we're really trying to find here. And some circumstances just might be out of reach, but at least we are trying to push the envelope and create that innovation and show that there's that demand. It might not be the best example, but looking at organic foods back in the day, it was like you couldn't compete, you know, buying a carton of strawberries, it was $8 for, a pint of strawberries versus, $2.99. And now they've come down in price and pretty comparable, might be, $5.99 versus $4.99. And I think the more the demand comes up and the more action and consumers are demanding for this kind of technology, hopefully that price will fall down. I don't know, Ms. Keel, if you would like to chime in, but that's kind of the sense that I feel like we're at least trying to achieve some delicate balance.
Yeah, I agree with exactly what you were saying. And I'll just add that, staff are constantly looking for innovation, and when they do want innovation, they put that as a requirement within the procurement, right? So it is done on a project per project basis. And we often see it with some of our projects, and then they compete. After that, it's okay. If we know what the innovation that we need, and that's described within our project procurement process, and then it goes to a competitive situation, and then you can get your best price from those technical requirements. So it is being done. But like you said, you have to have the staff with the innovation that they're looking for, right? And sometimes we would like to, have the innovation come to us, right? And how do we do that? Sometimes that's more complicated.
Thanks. Barry, do you have any follow-up to that?
No,
You
I
had some good points there.
I think we have to recognize it's kind of an irony that we're asking for innovation, but we're still trying to be financially responsible. We have to commit to a climate focus. How the taxpayer takes that, I don't know. They know that climate protective measures cost. We have to sell our commitment to them, make it their commitment. That's why Sam's saying, let's get public involvement. I think that's great. We have to have the public buy into this. I mean, if it's just from staff and council, it's like, oh, here they go again, spending money. But we have to convince our taxpayers that this is a requirement of entering into the future, that this climate threat is real and we're committed to it, and we want everybody to be committed to it. It's ongoing. It has to be continually resold, continually, as each generation comes on, each new segment of society moves into town. We have to show that we're committed to it and for valid reasons. So it's not going to be an easy kind of thing to take for granted, or you're going to get backlash. You're going to say, wait, that's too expensive. But if we commit to our ideals and we ask the town, the residents, to likewise get on board, then we can make a go of it. But if we just expect it to come from staff through council, rubber stamp, no, it has to be an ongoing education and recommitment ongoing. That's my thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Some very good points there. Sam?
Just in that vein, I just wanted to add that in addition to looking for innovation, sometimes you don't need innovation. Sometimes the simple things are the best and the most eco-friendly. And instead of adding all the technology to build on a wetland and keep the water flow, just don't build on the wetland. Instead of preparing all of these like stormwater documents, just maintain the catch basin. Like some things like that, I think that innovation isn't always the best policy, and that we as human beings, but also especially as people making large decisions, innovation is often very shiny and comes at a very steep cost often. but you don't need to reinvent the wheel a good chunk of the time. So like our green fleet is amazing. That innovation is great. But when we're looking at stormwater management and preemptive, sometimes the leaving nature alone is the cheapest and best solution if possible. So I just want to, like, as a counterpoint to innovation, simple is also great. And I don't think, I think people would be okay with a compromise, like paying for some things and leaving some things inexpensive, hopefully, for us all.
Thanks, Sam. It's like that delicate balance we were talking about earlier, and picking and choosing where that balance can be. That's a really good point. I like that. I have Councillor Gartner, and I'll go to Colin. Councillor Gartner.
Thank you. It's been a very interesting conversation. Thanks to all the members. And I want to thank you for bringing this to council. You know, sometimes people go, I didn't watch anybody, Councillor Gillen, but I'm sure some people roll their eyes when we talk about the environment and protecting the environment, and, you know, just the things that we need to do, that we must do for the world that we have. And something like this is important. And, you know, it's not going to be a straight line to the finish line, but we've got to do it. We've got to keep at this and tell the people who don't believe that these things are important or that they're too costly that there's not a choice, you know, but some people just don't get it yet. So thanks for, you know, hammering away at this, and, you know, the invasive species motion, and just thank you for your support. And I felt quite alone on council for many years, without a lot of people taking it seriously. So I really thank you for your not only your help, your really great help, your great ideas, your great emotions. So that's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. We've always have been a good advocate for the environment, and I really appreciate your hard work and dedication as well. Does not
Councillor
go
Gilland,
unnoticed.
Councillor Gilland, it's been a very hard slog and will continue. And hopefully this committee will help us and help council. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Colin.
I had a couple of points. One thing I liked about the plan was it was multifaceted. There seemed to be a number of different things. So I noticed the active transportation plan, for instance. And I think, to Sam's point, designing the kind of town that you want would go a long way to doing things. So for instance, if we made bicycling more attractive for people than driving, I think that would do a lot. And this is maybe just a pet peeve on my part, but a lot of people will just idle. They'll pull up to Starbucks or Tim Hortons and just leave their car idling. And I always wonder, has there been a review of our laws, like our bylaws, to check that sort of thing? Because I would love to be a bylaw officer and give those people a ticket sometimes, but you can't really do anything about it. So I think that would be a good thing to review as well.
Thank you, Colin. And just so you know, we did review that, and we do have, I believe it's a pilot of sorts to where we've reduced the idling. I believe, Councillor Gardner, I don't know if you remember, I believe it was 5 minutes, and I thought that was too long still. And I reduced the pilot to 2 years because I wanted to see it go down to 2 or 3 minutes. But yeah, we have reduced the idling time, and trust me, when that comes back to council in the report, we'll be asking probably for a reduced idle time again. Councillor Gartner, did you want to add to that? You're on mute.
Just going to say that my motion sat around for a long time, and maybe Ms. Keel would like to speak to it because she got it up and running again. So maybe just a quick précis of where we are at the moment.
Yeah, I would love to give that. So, Colin, thanks for your comment. It's very pertinent because we had our anti-idling policy approved by council right before the pandemic started. I'm just trying to remember. And one of the major pieces of the policy was a public education campaign. We've been preparing, it got delayed because of COVID. We didn't think it was the right time because no one was driving, no one was going to school, no one was out and about. So it is planned to start for September. We're working closely with the bylaw team, communications. We have a whole plan ready, and we had a student actually prepare us with education material for the schools to work with the schools in Aurora. So we're like getting it all set up for September because we were told that was probably the best time, like from a bylaw standpoint for idling, because that's when people are dropping off their kids, going to school. A lot more driving is happening in the fall. So we are very excited to actually launch it. So you'll probably start seeing signs out and about around that time. And we do plan to do a lot of public outreach like social media, you know, some other interactive challenges and engagement activities with public. So we're very excited about it. So, but thank you for bringing that point up. It's very important. And it was actually identified in our community energy plan as something important as well. So.
Thanks, Ms. Keel. I wanted to ask if Crystal had any questions or comments. I know, Crystal, you've had some challenges with your video feed and haven't seen any hand emojis or anything, but did you have any questions or comments, Crystal?
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I've had some connection issues tonight. Nope, I didn't have anything.
Okay, perfect. Anybody else have any comments they would like to add in regard to the climate lens or the matrix of sorts that the town's trying to put together to report to council or procurement? No? Okay, I actually had one question. I was looking at the table and the chart, and I know there's quite a few different plans that you will be referring to. So if an item were to come to council, and I know this is more for budget, but if an item is coming to council, are you utilizing all these plans to where you would have kind of like a check for each one that would apply to and then have a little explanation? Or was this going to be like a matrix of sorts to where, you know, you might be like, this score is 8 out of 10. And so that kind of makes it seem like it's more favorable on the climate lens approach. I'm just trying to understand the gauge of how we're going to be utilizing it, because there's so many to kind of choose from, but maybe some of them don't apply to a certain item. I just kind of want to understand what that matrix would look like for us to say, oh, this is a good choice for us. It scores like a 6 out of 8, whatever, versus, you know, if we did this, it would mean we're like a 2 out of 8. And oh, what's the consequence of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know some other municipalities are using checklists and potentially scoring systems. We didn't feel like, let's start with the staff report. The staff report, we felt like because there's so many projects and topics that would go through council that wouldn't be applicable, we found we needed something a little bit broader and not so specific. So this is what we came up with because we felt like we had, you know, if we were really targeting, let's say, one of the plans where we could have a checklist, you know, because it'd be a lot more specific, then I could see how that would apply. But in this case, we didn't want to exclude our other environmental initiative plans, like our stormwater or our forestry study. So we wanted to make it a little more general to say, you know, okay, if a project went through, you know, they would just delete all other plans that weren't applicable, and then they would say, let's say they left the stormwater management master plan because it was applicable, and then they'd say applicable because, and then explain how their project is applicable. So that's kind of how it would work for the reports. And we also have other initiatives that could, that could support it. And I don't really have an example, and they could be, projects outside of, engineering that might apply to the stormwater management plan. So we didn't want to make it so rigid. We wanted this to be a place to highlight, hey, this is a project to keep your eye on because it's supporting one of our plans and you should take note of it. Because we didn't have any way of showing that anywhere within our reporting, our staff reporting. Finally, we also felt that if we wanted to have real impact, a staff report is almost too late. And that's why we said we have to have something at the budget process, because that is the very initial start of the process. And once it reaches the report, often it's a side note, or, like a lot of these big decisions that impact on a project level happen at this budgeting process time frame. So we felt it more important to have it at that point. So that's kind of where we came about, like having it in both locations. That way we've covered everything. We've covered these, capital projects, these operational situations and projects. And then we also have all the staff reports. And that had to be a lot more flexible because, as you get all kinds of reports, right? It could be, something program level or project level, or, there's just so many scenarios that go through for council reports. So it had to be flexible and not so rigid with a point system or a checklist. And it was more to, highlight those projects that, have an environmental piece to it. And so at the budget side, we felt that it's strongly that we needed something at that point in the process on the capital side. And like I mentioned, because we have identified already at this point our major projects and operations that have an impact on greenhouse gas emissions already, they're already flagged. We know that they can easily, put that through the budget process and say, hey, this is a project we've already, identified as impactful. So, please pay attention. Please, give me some priority. And we felt like at that point of the process was really the most critical in that discussion. And I'm not part of those budget discussions, so I'm sure Councillor Gilliland, you can feel that, that's a really important piece or point in the time frame of these projects where it needs to be discussed. So that's where we decided to also put it.
Okay. I like what you're saying. From what I'm understanding, you're pulling specific plans or actionable plans and master plans that it would apply to and specifically, and kind of showing that, like you said, I like how you're saying you're raising that flag, pay attention here, we can have some impact and here's why. And so I do like it gives you an opportunity to highlight those reasons, whereas before we may not have been looking for those reasons to kind of base some of our decision making. And maybe eventually the more we adopt this climate lens and that reporting, the more we will learn how to create that matrix and get better at that, the more we self-educate ourselves and staff and what products are out there, what other municipalities are doing, and it'll probably morph into something that is more streamlined. So this is a really great starting point. I appreciate that. I was just, when I saw all the list, I was kind of like, oh, like we're going to get this huge list of things. So I wasn't really quite sure how that was going to translate, but I do appreciate how it comes from the budgeting standpoint. So you kind of have something up front, so you know what you're looking for and kind of like what you've been kind of given permission to kind of go out and kind of procure, and hence why you have the procurement stage. And I also like the life cycle cost as well. I think Mr. Downey's best example, and Councillor Gardner, you probably heard this 100 times. You can buy a shower curtain for $1.99 and it'll last you a year and you have to replace it. Or you could buy that shower curtain for $15 and it'll last you for 20 years, whatever, 20 years. That's probably an exaggeration, but you kind of get what I'm saying as far as that cost recovery, you're not throwing it out and recycling. So I think there's some really great innovation as far as your matrix or the climate lens. That at least is a starting point. So I think that's great.
This will be a bit of an evolving initiative, because right now we know our most impactful infrastructure and operation projects at the town in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. That's very clear, and we have a very clear plan, and those operations and infrastructure are being managed within a plan with reduction targets and with special needs. We're now doing the same for our climate adaptation through the adaptation plan, and once that's completed, we'll also then be a lot more educated on what types of projects, what types of operations put us in a more vulnerable position in terms of climate change, and what types of projects make us more resilient to it. And this again will have to be reflected within the budget process, right? Once we have that, more defined. Right now, we have to keep it a little more general because we don't know enough, and it's evolving, through the development of that plan. So I like how you said that it's the first start, and I think it's a very big step forward in terms of where we want to go. Is it the final place? I mean, that's something we'll have to revise and see in the future, how we could always make it better, or how it's working. And
Thanks, Ms. Keel. Does anybody else have any comments about the matrix or the working progress that we're trying to achieve here in the reporting? Colin?
Yes, just want to, I think a really important part of the project, of course, will be envisioning what the project is you want. So let's say you want roofing. I know that there's solar tiles that you can now buy instead of regular roofing that actually generate electricity. So maybe, and then if the proposals, please provide us your best proposal for solar tiling. It might be better than just please provide a roofing proposal. So I think that piece of it, envisioning it, is probably an important piece.
Thanks, Colin.
I think you were saying that, but I just thought I would draw that out.
That's great point. Councillor Gardner, do you have your hand up to speak one more time?
Well, I was just, I love that idea of targeting it. So it's out there to begin with. We don't leave it up to the supplier to figure that out. I'm not sure, to Ms. Keel, I'm not sure I'm understanding everything correctly. Because what sometimes happens is a councillor will bring a motion to the council table, or staff will bring a report, and then council says, refer it to budget. So council already has an idea of what's going to be asked in advance, which I think is helpful. I'm not sure in your staff position if that could be done, because that would give, I don't know who's going to be presenting this at budget, because you would be the best person to present the environmental initiatives. Are you going to be presenting, or does it go to somebody else to present to us at budget time?
I am normally not involved in the budgeting. It's usually each budget holder, which is not myself. So they would include this piece within their business case for the capital projects. Now, just one point I should mention, for example, when we talk about facilities, when they're putting their budget forward for their list of capital projects, for example, they're very, very much aware that they have the 5-year energy plan and they have their list of energy projects and they know it and they know to put it in there. So they are very much the owners of that plan and would be able to, present that within their business case. Ask them about stormwater management master plan. No, they're not going to really know what's going on there, but engineering will have, it's so whoever the budget owner is essentially also their the asset management owner as well, right? So they're aware of any environmental plan that is related to their asset, is what I'm going to say. So they're capable to put it in their business case for sure and speak to it themselves.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out how we can get some more clout with respect to this. So that can be offline.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Counselor. Sandy, I know you've been over there pretty quiet. Do you have any questions or comments at all, or are you just taking it all in? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I guess I'm dialed in, so my mic on my computer's not working very well recently. So no, I'm just taking it all in right now, trying to understand everything. Specifically with that table, I had that question that you had and how it was really going to be used to answer the questions that will be had for the projects. That question is already answered now.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments at all on the report? No? Well, good. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Keel. That was a great presentation, and I appreciate all the hard work that you're doing. This is a very exciting project moving forward, so I appreciate that. All right, so if there's no further comments, I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We don't have any further additional items, but before I adjourn, if I may, this is appropriate, Ms. Clerk, I do want to say that I did have a motion that was passed on Tuesday about invasive species and insects, and this motion was really something that comprised from our last meeting in April when we had the conversation about the invasive species and trying to get a handle on it. I felt it was really imperative to try and get some more education and awareness of how we can mitigate the problems that we're having with this invasive species to that respect, and how can we get more volunteer stewardship. And I also threw in education campaigning on insects as well. Obviously, we know gypsy moth or LDD is quite the problem. So I think it's one of those things that when you see it in real life versus a picture, it just sticks in your brain a lot longer. Mr. Downey had called it, there was the term reticular identification. That was a new term that I learned. And I just think it speaks volumes when someone shows it to you, to your face, and then all of a sudden you're pointing it out everywhere and you see it. If I'm like, I don't know about you, if I go into a trail entry and I see a bunch of pictures of what to look for, I completely forget what I just saw, 10 minutes into the walk. So I'm really hoping that this will educate the public and get people more aware of what's out there to help protect our environment and our wildlife and our soils. So I'm just really proud that you guys had brought this up, and I'm proud that this motion had passed. So at least we can move the needle forward. Anyway, that was my little soliloquy tonight. Anyway, without further ado, it is 8:17, so it's adjournment time. So may I have a motion to adjourn? Colin, and second by Sam. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate all your feedback. Honestly, every time you guys have anything to say, I know Councillor Gartner and I are always going offline trying to think outside the box and